On July 4th, 1992, in the American tourist area of the Grand Canyon, the whole place suddenly turned into a full-on military zone. Helicopters filled the sky, roadblocks were set up everywhere, police dogs were brought in, and more than 500 law enforcement officers flooded the area. All of them were looking for just one man. The police believed that at any moment he could take hostages or open fire on anyone who got in his way. The entire area was locked down so they could capture what was considered one of the most dangerous criminals of that time, a ruthless serial offender involved in armed robberies, murders, and dismemberment of victims. On top of all that, he had escaped from prison after being sentenced to 4 life terms. The problem was that this guy had an incredible ability to disappear into mountains and forests. An even bigger problem was that despite the massive manhunt, nobody could find him. Officers had orders to capture him wherever he was found, dead or alive. This man was so good at vanishing that he earned the nickname the Nightmare. For those seeing me for the first time, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I talk about all kinds of strange and mysterious stories from around the world. And as always, before we begin, hit that like button. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of The Nightmare, a story filled with robbery, murder, armed violence, prison escapes, and an ending nobody saw coming. It all starts with Danny Horning, a career criminal who seemed to have done every crime imaginable. He was known for his violent temper and extreme aggression. The way he treated his victims showed just how much rage he carried inside. Nearly every crime scene he left behind showed signs of severe violence that are too graphic to describe. Danny would do almost anything to escape after committing a crime. At the same time, he had a strangely calm side. Sometimes he'd threaten people with a weapon, while other times he'd act completely relaxed and normal. One time, he walked into a convenience store to rob it. Calmly, he told the owner, "Give me all the money in the register. I also want cigarettes, some liquor, and a few other things." The owner sarcastically replied, "So you're robbing me and shopping at the same time?" That one comment was enough to set Danny off. He beat the man to death with his bare hands instead of shooting him. Then he trashed the store, stole what he wanted, and even set products on fire in the back, all because the owner annoyed him. The most dangerous thing about Danny was his military background. He spent years serving in elite U.S. Army Special Operations units where he learned tracking, survival, movement through rough terrain, hand-to-hand combat, and various self-defense techniques. Over time, he became an expert at surviving in the wilderness for long periods. Unfortunately, after leaving the military, he used those skills for crime and violence. As the years passed, Danny Horning's name appeared more and more in police reports and court files. During the 1980s, he became one of Arizona's most wanted criminals. It started with bank robberies. His method never changed. He would storm into a bank aggressively, scream at employees, and demand that the vaults be emptied immediately. The problem was that Danny wasn't like most robbers whose only goal was to grab the money and run. If he felt that things were slipping out of his control, he became a real monster capable of killing everyone inside. Sometimes he took 1 or 2 hostages to help him escape. During one robbery, he forced a bank employee to drive him for miles before abandoning him on a remote road and stealing the employee's car. Other times, he threatened drivers directly to clear the road or hand over their vehicles. Anyone who refused to cooperate was often shot on the spot. Eventually, Authorities issued public warnings across Arizona advising people not to resist him and to comply if confronted in order to minimize casualties. Officially, he was labeled the most dangerous bank robber in the state. But the case that truly destroyed his life came in 1990. Police discovered the mutilated body of a murder victim in California after a violent robbery. Danny's name immediately came up during the investigation because the crime matched his signature style: robbery, brutal murder, destruction of property, and the burning of the victim's vehicle. Investigators became convinced that he was involved. A federal order was issued. Danny Horning had to be captured by any means necessary, yet he didn't stop. After a long series of robberies, kidnappings, and armed assaults, authorities finally captured him following a 7-hour operation involving a chase, a gunfight, and tracking teams in the mountains. The court sentenced him to 4 consecutive life terms because the death penalty was not available. Everyone believed it was over. Danny Horning would spend the rest of his life behind bars, but prison didn't change him. He remained violent, unstable, and dangerous. He constantly fought with guards and inmates. He was linked to the deaths of 4 prisoners through extremely violent attacks. Because of this, he spent most of his time in solitary confinement. He was only allowed outside during specific hours under heavy supervision. For someone like Danny, solitary confinement meant endless hours with nothing to do except think, and that's exactly what he did. He spent those hours planning how to escape. During recreation periods, he studied every detail around him. His first goal was getting out of solitary so he could move more freely and observe the prison properly. After 7 months, prison officials finally approved his requests following behavioral reviews and evaluations. Once released from solitary, Danny appeared to be a completely different person. In reality, all he did was sit quietly and watch. He memorized guard schedules, shift changes, inmate uniforms, door locations, and every possible weakness he could exploit. As time passed, he behaved like a man waiting for a single opportunity, a chance to escape, no matter how impossible it seemed. Danny's entire plan was built on one simple idea. He had nothing left to lose. The harshest punishment possible was life in prison, and he was already serving 4 life sentences. If he attempted an escape and failed, he'd simply end up back where he already was. So in his mind, there was no downside. His attitude became, why not try? What do I have to lose? Then, on May 12th, 1992, Danny Horning decided to do the thing that most people believed was impossible. Most people considered it impossible to escape from Arizona's maximum security prison. The place had 9 layers of security. There were architectural defenses, human security, electronic systems, smart monitoring technology, and even the surrounding geography worked as protection. The entire prison was basically a concrete maze. If you weren't an employee, there was almost no chance you'd figure out how to move through the building and get out. There were guards everywhere. Surveillance cameras covered nearly every foot of the facility. Highly sensitive audio sensors monitored activity, and tracking systems were connected throughout the prison. And even if someone somehow got past all of that, the area around the prison was practically empty. No towns, no crowds, nowhere to hide. If you escaped, chances were you'd be spotted and captured within hours. What's crazy is that Danny didn't need weapons, violence, or a shootout. For months he had been studying the prison. He knew employee routines, hallways, schedules, and every tiny detail. Eventually, he realized there was no way to escape by force. Digging a tunnel, taking hostages, or starting a riot wasn't going to work. Then he found an easier way. One day, he managed to get his hands on clothing belonging to a medical worker inside the prison. Calmly, he put on the uniform and started walking through the hallways like he was just another employee finishing a shift. He didn't run. He didn't threaten anyone. Nobody paid attention to him. The funny part is that it still took him almost an hour and a half to get out because he didn't know the layout perfectly. Imagine this. Danny was literally walking through the prison, and every time he saw a janitor, he would ask for directions. He chose janitors for two reasons. First, they knew the building better than almost anyone because they cleaned every section of it. Second, janitors usually didn't know every employee personally, so they weren't likely to question whether he was really a nurse or not. So Danny relied on them to guide him toward the exits. Even stranger, he passed multiple security checkpoints without anyone becoming suspicious. The guards saw medical clothing and automatically assumed he belonged there. Nobody could imagine that an inmate would attempt to escape from Arizona State Prison in such a simple way. If someone escaped, people expected a dramatic prison break, not a guy casually walking out the front. After an hour and a half of wandering through the maze, Danny Horning walked beyond the prison walls. Nobody noticed. Hours passed before prison officials finally realized that one of Arizona's most dangerous inmates had vanished without a trace. At that moment, one of the biggest manhunts in state history began. Remember how Danny had military special operations training? He was taught survival, concealment, tracking, and how to live in remote wilderness areas. For him, the empty land surrounding the prison wasn't an obstacle. It was home turf. After escaping, he completely disappeared. At first, police assumed he would steal a car and flee the state as quickly as possible. Instead, he did the exact opposite. Rather than running toward cities, he headed deeper into the mountains and forests of northern Arizona. That's where he became a ghost. Danny was practically a professor of wilderness survival. He stole food and supplies from abandoned cabins and vacation homes. He moved through forests and mountain terrain without leaving obvious tracks. Sometimes he would go days without approaching another person. Every time police got close, he vanished again. Helicopters searched the region, police dogs followed trails, but Danny always seemed one step ahead. Within days, what started as a normal search operation became a nightmare for law enforcement. Danny understood one critical fact. As long as he stayed inside the Grand Canyon region and the rugged wilderness surrounding it, he had a major advantage over everyone hunting him. Of course, nobody can survive forever in the wild. Danny still needed supplies, so on June 25th, 1992, he traveled to a costume shop in Flagstaff intending to rob it. The timing wasn't right though, so he decided to hide in a parking garage until things quieted down. He wanted to enter when there were no customers inside. While waiting, he noticed a husband and wife arguing inside their car. Within seconds, he climbed into the vehicle. He pressed what appeared to be a handgun against the husband's head and said, "Drive, get us out of here." Now you're probably wondering where he got a gun. He didn't. The gun was actually just a tree branch. But if a wanted fugitive suddenly jumps into your car and jams something against your head, you're probably not going to stop and ask whether it's real. The couple was terrified. The husband started driving exactly where Danny told him to go. During the ride, Danny behaved strangely. Sometimes he spoke calmly like a normal person. Other times, he exploded with threats, warning them that if they tried to escape or attract attention, he would kill them immediately. Instead of traveling far away, Danny directed them toward the Grand Canyon. They spent an entire night at a small lodge in the area. While police searched everywhere for him, Danny was sitting comfortably in the middle of a hotel, showering, eating, and resting, all paid for by his hostages. He kept the couple captive. Then something even crazier happened. While staying there, Danny managed to steal a real firearm from a security guard. Just like that, he went from a fugitive threatening people with a tree branch to an armed criminal carrying an actual gun. Later, when the story became public, investigators said Danny moved with unbelievable confidence during that period. Nobody who crossed paths with him suspected they were looking at a man who had escaped 4 life sentences. Then Danny entered a whole new phase of the chase. He decided, why keep hiding in the woods when hostages can help me travel anywhere I want? That's when he started playing psychological games with the police. As he moved across the region, he left behind messages and cassette recordings. His goal was simple: make sure authorities knew he was still nearby. In one recording, he openly threatened to take more hostages if the pursuit continued. He demanded $1 million in exchange for releasing future captives. Then he made an even stranger demand. He said that if police wanted to negotiate and get his current hostages back, they needed to release his brother, Jerry Horning, from prison. At this point, Danny was acting like he was fighting a personal war against law enforcement. Every time he disappeared, another message would appear. The craziest part? He kept rotating hostages. He would release one hostage, leave behind a message, and then kidnap someone else. It was as if he wanted to tell police, I'm right here among you, and you still can't catch me. Even more alarming, some of his messages made it clear that he was following news coverage of the manhunt in real time. He knew where police were searching. He knew how the operation was expanding. And with every passing day, Danny became more of a nightmare for both the authorities and the public, because nobody knew who the next hostage would be. The man was incredibly smart. He convinced police he was constantly nearby, while in reality, he remained hidden deep in the wilderness with his captives. His military training gave him a huge advantage. Sometimes he would walk back over his own footprints to hide the true direction of travel. Other times, he moved in circles or figure-8 patterns, making it much harder for trackers and search dogs to follow his trail. He'd mess with the police dogs too. He only moved at night and stayed hidden during the day, tucked between rocks or deep inside the woods. Even when it came to food, he wasn't reckless. He'd pick isolated cabins or seasonal vacation homes that were sitting empty. He'd get in, grab what he needed, and get out before anyone noticed. That's why every time the cops thought they were closing in on him, they'd find nothing. Danny had already been there a day or two earlier. At that point, law enforcement came up with what they thought was the smartest move possible. They said, this guy's a wilderness expert. He's trained. We're not on his level out there. Why don't we bring in people who are? That's when a team from U.S. Army Special Operations got involved. The problem? These guys weren't built for protection. They were built for destruction. The chances of taking Danny alive were pretty slim. Armies are trained to eliminate threats, not run manhunts. Then, one special operations officer came up with a brilliant strategy. He said, "If we keep chasing him the way we're thinking right now, this is going to drag on forever. More people are going to get hurt. This guy never moves without a hostage, and if he doesn't have one right now, the second he hears special forces are involved, he'll grab another one." He continued, "Honestly, someone this smart and dangerous could probably kidnap one of our own guys if he got the chance, so chasing him directly isn't the answer." His idea was simple. Don't catch him, corner him. Because no matter how tough Danny was, there had to be cracks starting to show. The guy had been on the run for nearly 50 days, living in mountains and forests. There was no way he was comfortable. No way he was sleeping well. Eventually, his body and mind would break down. The officer believed that if they just kept the pressure on, Danny would eventually come to them. Sounds logical, right? But reality was a different story. The Grand Canyon and the surrounding wilderness are enormous. Massive mountains, dense forests, narrow canyons, rock formations stretching for miles and miles. Some areas were so rough that even search teams struggled to move through them. So every time law enforcement surrounded one area, Danny somehow slipped away and showed up somewhere else. The helicopters searched for hours. Officers spread through the forests, mountain trails, and roads. Nothing. No real results. Things got even worse because people who lived nearby and even tourists were getting fed up. The government shut down tourism and restricted access to parts of the area, but people still lived there. The problem wasn't solved. The only real solution was catching Danny. The containment strategy wasn't working. By now, he'd collected a bunch of nicknames: the Ghost, the Nightmare, the Eagle of the Grand Canyon. Then something unexpected happened. As the manhunt continued, Danny finally started feeling the pressure. Roadblocks were everywhere. Special operations teams were monitoring exits and highways around the clock. So Danny decided it was time to leave the area completely. While moving through the region, he spotted 2 British tourists who had ignored all the warnings and entered the restricted zone anyway. Honestly, nobody knows what they were thinking. Authorities had told everyone to stay away, but these 2 still decided to spend their vacation in the middle of an active manhunt. Danny found them and kidnapped them at gunpoint. He forced them to drive him out of the Grand Canyon area. The crazy part? He passed through multiple checkpoints without any issues. Why? Because local police were convinced Danny couldn't possibly leave the area. The special operations teams had taken over the search, and confidence was running high. That confidence created a blind spot. Danny slipped through 2 checkpoints and got out. Imagine that! Police officers were waving vehicles through without even getting close to them. The tourists acted completely normal because they were terrified he'd shoot them if they gave any sign that something was wrong. After several hours, the plan worked. Danny escaped the containment zone. Meanwhile, authorities were still searching the Grand Canyon. You could say that was the moment their last real chance of catching him disappeared. By then, he'd been on the run for 53 days. But behind the scenes, things were finally starting to turn against him because the truth was simple. He was exhausted. Weeks of stress, almost no sleep, constant fear, non-stop movement, a manhunt that never ended. It was catching up to him. He started making mistakes. The British tourists were eventually released and immediately told police what had happened. The search area expanded. Reports of stolen vehicles and suspicious activity started pouring in. Danny was now being forced to leave the wilderness more often. He needed food. He needed transportation. He needed places to hide. Little by little, he got slower, more careless. The fatigue was winning. Then came July 4th, 1992. After a series of reports involving suspicious activity near a highway leading toward Phoenix, Danny made several critical mistakes. Instead of relying on careful planning, he started relying on luck. That led to the final pursuit. At that point, special operations teams received a simple order: capture Danny, dead or alive. End this. Everybody went on full alert. After a report involving a stolen vehicle, officers moved in fast. Danny had once been part of the military world himself. The second he saw how the operation was unfolding, he knew this wasn't a game anymore. He understood that if they locked onto his location, they weren't backing off. For the first time, he couldn't disappear quickly enough. The teams identified the stolen vehicle he was driving and closed in. Police cars, armored vehicles, helicopters. Everything surrounded him. They ordered him to stop. Instead, his vehicle crashed into a tree beside the road. Rather than surrendering, he jumped out and sprinted into the woods. But this time was different. The police dogs picked up his trail. Hours later, they tracked him to a house where people were living. Danny had hidden there because he knew he was less likely to be shot if civilians were nearby. The moment special operations officers surrounded the house, something happened nobody expected. Danny surrendered immediately. His exact attitude was basically, "Take me, I'm done." After his capture, he went back to court. At that point, another sentence didn't really matter. He was already serving multiple life terms. Authorities sent him back to the same prison he escaped from, but this time there was a new order. He would spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement. What's really strange is that more than 35 years later, people still talk about his story. Some see him as a violent and dangerous criminal. Others see him as a man who refused to slowly die behind bars. Believe it or not, some stores even printed his face on t-shirts and sold them. Dozens of products were made celebrating his escape and treating him like some symbol of freedom. Even though this was a man who was willing to hurt or kill people just to stay out of prison. The same prison he ended up in because of the crimes he committed. And honestly, that's why you should never be surprised when people defend criminals, bullies, or even killers. We live in a world where people remember certain things and completely forget others. Anyway, that's today's story. Hope you enjoyed it. If you're into strange stories like this one, make sure to follow the channel and show some support. Thanks for watching.